Today, we're diving into one of literature's most intense, most passionate, and most heartbreaking love stories. It's a story about two incredible people who fell deeply in love, but their entire relationship, all that fire, it happened almost completely through the mail. And that really gets you thinking, doesn't it? It forces us to ask this huge question. Can a love that changes your whole life, can it really count? Can it exist if it's trapped on a page, completely terrified of the real world?
So let's meet our two main characters. On one side, you've got Franz Kafka, the tormented literary genius, just riddled with sickness and self-doubt. And on the other, Milena Jesenská. She's this brilliant, passionate translator living in Vienna, fiercely independent but stuck in a really unhappy marriage. Just two people in two different cities, both kind of living in their own quiet worlds of desperation.
Now, their story, it didn't start like a movie, with a glance across a crowded room or anything like that. Nope. It started with a professional request, a letter about work that would end up changing both of their lives forever.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It really tells a stark story, right? For 3 years, literally hundreds of letters are flying back and forth between them. But in all that time, they only saw each other face to face maybe 2 or 3 times. It's wild. Their real lives were just on these two separate and ultimately tragic tracks.
And this is the crucial part. This whole thing started as business. It's 1920, Kafka's in a sanatorium, he's really sick with tuberculosis, and Milena, who was one of the few people who saw his genius super early on, she writes to him. She just wants his permission to translate his stories into Czech. That's it. A simple, professional note. But well, what started as business became something else entirely, and it happened fast. The letters turned into this private world where all the formality just burned away, and what was left was this incredibly raw, desperate intimacy.
Yeah, very, very quickly, the polite, "Dear Miss Milena," just gave way to this absolute flood of emotion. The letters became their real world, the one place they could share everything, their deepest fears, their sicknesses, their hopes, all of it. You can actually see the shift happening right in this quote. Kafka finds out that Milena is also unwell, and he starts writing with this unbelievable concern for her, almost forgetting his own problems. He gets obsessed with her feeling of not being able to breathe, wishing he could somehow magically bring her to the sanatorium. The professional distance, poof, it's completely gone. And this quote right here, wow, this is the absolute peak of that passion on paper. He's trying to picture her face, but his feeling for her is so intense, so overwhelming, that her image is just consumed by flames in his mind. Their connection through words was so powerful, it was almost painful. But here's the tragedy of it all. For Kafka, that fire on the page, it just could not exist in the real world. His own mind was the prison that kept them apart. It's this incredible paradox. He could pour his entire soul into an envelope and mail it off, but the actual thought of a real, physical relationship, it filled him with this unspeakable terror. The more intense the letters got, the more he backed away from any possibility of making it real. He even came up with his own kind of theory for his sickness. He wrote that his brain was so overwhelmed with anxiety and sadness that it just couldn't take it anymore, so it offloaded the burden, passed it right down to his lungs. In his mind, his mental anguish and his physical illness were the exact same thing. And all of this just built up into this impossible wall. And we're not talking about small doubts. These were deep, crippling convictions. He was terrified of meeting her, he felt completely unworthy of love, and he honestly believed he was just unfit for life. The Milena and the letters was this perfect ideal, but the reality of a relationship was a threat his mind just could not handle. And this quote just says everything, doesn't it? It was a war inside his own head. He felt like he couldn't listen to her calm, loving voice, and at the same time, listen to the screaming terror of his own anxieties. He was just on the ground, totally defeated by his own mind. So, because they were never able to bridge that gap between their love in letters and their love in reality, their story doesn't end together. It ends with two separate, tragic conclusions, shaped by the brutal history of the 20th century. Kafka's long battle with tuberculosis finally came to an end in 1924. He was only 40 years old. But it is important to know, he didn't die alone. His final partner, a woman named Dora Diamond, was right there by his side, caring for him until the very end.
Milena's path was one of immense courage and, ultimately, tragedy. She did leave her husband, and later she became active in the resistance against the Nazi occupation. Because of that work, she was arrested and sent to the Ravensbrück concentration camp. She died there in 1944, a victim of the real-world horrors that Kafka had spent his entire life fearing in his own mind.
And so we're left with this, a line from one of Kafka's letters that feels like the perfect summary of their entire relationship. A love so total, so absolute, that it didn't need them to be in the same room to exist. But at the same time, it was so terrified of reality that it could only exist on paper. It was their sanctuary, and in the end, it was also their prison.